Live from Johannesburg, this is eNCA. Good morning, I'm Michelle Craig. To comment on our stories, you can find us on Twitter and on Facebook at eNCA. You can also track our main stories using the following hashtags: SANEF, ICC and Miss SA. But first, it's breaking news. Public Protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane plans to oppose the review of her Absa CIEX report. She says her remedial actions have been misunderstood. Well, our senior specialist reporter Karyn Maughan has been following the story. She joins us in studio. Karyn, thanks for coming in. So the Public Protector taking on Absa, the Reserve Bank, Parliament and the Finance Minister.
It is quite extraordinary, and I think that certainly in the history of the office of what we've experienced before, we have seen, various threats of challenges, etc., but nothing really ever translating during the tenure of Thuli Madonsela into this kind of scale of a court case that we're seeing now playing out with Busisiwe Mkhwebane. And it's going to be quite an ugly battle because the Finance Minister, in a very sort of politely worded statement saying that he had attempted to engage with Busisiwe Mkhwebane, but it became apparent that review was really the only option by which he could challenge the report. And going further to not just say he's challenging this contentious remedial action about Parliament being asked to consider constitutional amendments, but challenging, Michelle, the report in its entirety and saying that it was very unclear to him and the ministry on what evidence the Public Protector had made her factual findings, also saying that he did not believe that Absa should be forced to pay back that 1.1 billion rand, and he was taking the position that his previous predecessors had taken on this, that it was simply not a viable option to continue with.
Let's take a step back for just a second and let's go back to the report itself. So the Public Protector, the Absa report, she says Absa's failure to, or rather the alleged failure to recover misappropriated funds, that's part of what's contained in it. And of course then, as you mentioned, the constitutional amendments in terms of the Reserve Bank's policies. Just take us back to the background of the report and what it found.
Well, essentially what the Public Protector was asked to investigate was whether government had failed to implement the findings and recommendations of the CIEX report, which of course was a report which was provided by former British spies with regard to what they said was apartheid-era looting. And it made a number of quite strange claims, including that there were links between Pagad and Osama bin Laden. There were kind of veiled references to how government should attempt to effectively blackmail, people in financial institutions to pay back the money rather than go for and coerce them with threats of possible legal action and criminal sanction.
So this was the CIEX report?
This is the CIEX report. It's a very contentious document, and it has been criticised amongst many other people by people like former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan. That being said, there were a number of investigations, including the Davis panel investigation into the averments in the CIEX report. And what happened with the Davis investigation was they said, look, clearly this was a irregular, unlawful bailout payment. There's no disagreement from Absa or anyone about that. But we believe the beneficiaries were in fact Sanlam's shareholders, not Absa itself. And the process of trying to recuperate that money is simply untenable. What are you going to do? Make one person pay 5 rand? Or how is this going to work? It's not going to work. We don't believe that there should be an attempt to recover. And that was the attitude taken by government as well. Now, what has happened is that Busisiwe Mkhwebane appears to have based much of her report, which is a very skimpy 59 pages, on much of what Dennis Davis did. But unlike him, she's saying that money must be recovered through the SIU, that money must be paid back. And Judge Davis has said, look, on the back of what I've read, I can't understand why she would have deviated from what I did. And this remark by Malusi Gigaba in the statement yesterday that there's not this link between the evidence and the factual findings, I think is going to be the beginning of something quite profound. Because unless you can substantively say, I had this evidence and this is what led me to do this, you've got a problem. Add into the mix the fact that Absa has raised the issue that in the preliminary report, Michelle, the Public Protector stated that former Reserve Bank Chris Stoltz had alluded to some document which showed that Absa had agreed that it would pay back this interest, which is really at the heart of this whole thing. Stoltz subsequently said to me that that was absolute nonsense, that he'd never said anything of the kind. We ran that story, and when the final report came out, the Stoltz claim is completely absent. So, you know, this entire court process is going to unfold a lot of exactly what went on here, and, you know, what the public protector's thinking was in terms of making this recommendation that goes against every previous investigation that's happened.
So in that same report, Busisiwe Mkhwebane directs Parliament to effect constitutional amendments to the Reserve Bank's job. So she says what her action, her remedial action that she suggests in there, or rather, quite a strong word is used here, she directs Parliament to make these constitutional amendments. She says that's misunderstood.
Well, essentially what Parliament is doing is it's saying that it's completely inappropriate for her to direct it to consider constitutional amendments, that is simply untenable. And they're questioning, you know, that this potentially undermines their independence. Her argument through her spokesperson is that, no, she said to Parliament, you can consider this. You should consider this. But if Parliament goes through its processes and says, you know, we simply don't believe that this is an appropriate course of action and rejects her remedial action, then she'll be fine with that. But Parliament, of course, has taken a very different view and said that the wording of this and ordering Parliament to go through a debate about the key constitutional mandate of the South African Reserve Bank, which would, if successful, constitute a major shift in South African economic policy, is simply illegal and inappropriate.
Where did this even come from, Karyn, this direction to the Reserve Bank?
I think that is the question of all questions, because Absa said that, Reserve Bank said that. There is no indication at this point that this relief was not asked for. There's no indication that anyone, certainly in the preliminary report, it wasn't put on the table as a potential, you know, remedial action. And on that basis alone, it's extremely problematic, because Absa's turned around and said, well, if we'd known about this, we would have made inputs. I mean, it's the Reserve Bank has said, you know, you're basically trying to constitutionally transform our role, and you never even told us. So on that basis as well, you know, a court's going to turn around and say, this is completely unfair and procedurally inappropriate. There are so many aspects to this report which are so difficult to understand, and I think the question that you raise is pivotal. Why did this happen seemingly out of the blue, and in a landscape, Michelle, where we are very well aware that this debate about so-called monopoly capital, which has been the center of this kind of push-pull, you know, state capture versus white monopoly capital debate within our political framework, you know, the fact that this remedial action was framed the way it was, without any explanation, is very, very disquieting.
It's been an interesting few months, the new public protector.
I think, you know, one of the most profound things for me is that, you know, with the previous public protector, when she produced these documents, whether it be on Nkandla, whether it be on Prasa, whatever, those documents were hundreds and hundreds of pages. And it was multiple references to people that were interviewed. Everything was gone through. And that was why no one really ever managed to successfully review them. I mean, the president is now taking state capture review, a report on a review because of this issue of, you know, his right to institute a commission of inquiry. But during Thuli Madantsila's tenure, we certainly didn't see, you know, the kind of successful legal challenges to her reports, because she nailed everything down, and she would always soften a lot of her remedial action in the final report, whereas now we have this 59-page document which is suggesting a complete rehaul of the South African economy, and we, you know, the actual evidential heart of that is something like 20 pages.
Yeah. All right, senior specialist reporter Karyn Maughan, as always, thanks for coming in.